Hello, I'm Erik. I'm here to rant a little bit about how casual graphics development has gotten kind of not so fun since we're moving away from OpenGL and over to Vulkan. Yeah. So first, I want to address kind of like a little bit of a comparison of OpenGL and Vulkan seen from people, like seen through the eyes of people who are writing casual programs, so programs that don't need to squeeze all the CPU side performance out of the driver, and but still needs to use graphics features. So OpenGL is fairly easy to get started with. You know, like a minimal application here is 22 lines of code. And yeah, it's pretty straightforward what it does. It clears the screen, draws some triangles with some colors, and yeah. Vulkan, it's not quite the same. Yeah, it's not quite as bad as I say here, but it's usually you have a your first triangle takes about 1,000 lines of code. And it's not particularly fun code to write either. So if you look at the pros and cons from these casual developers, like it's kind of looking a bit bad for OpenGL here. It's easy to get started. It's easy to, looking bad for Vulkan. It's like OpenGL is kind of winning on this comparison. However, there's one major thing, and that's that OpenGL is not really moving forward. It's not adding new GPU features. So if you want to write casual programs that are targeting bleeding edge things, mesh shaders, ray tracing, these kinds of things, OpenGL isn't really a viable option. So so what do, right? How can we get rid of having to write these thousands of lines of codes just to, you know, draw some simple meshes and stuff like that? So there's some alternatives there. One is to use pre-existing middleware. Another one is to create something new, hopefully better middleware. And the last one is to expose new features through OpenGL and Zinc. So a few middleware solutions that I've looked at. BGFX is one. It provides a C and a C++ API. It's actively maintained. But sadly, there's like a problem with it, at least from my perspective, is that you're not really targeting Vulkan with that. You're targeting kind of this abstract BGFX abstraction layer, which means that you kind of you get all of these problems of least common denominator, unless you kind of bend over backwards in order to check for all these features that might be, you know, required by the spec. You're also targeting, when you're compiling a program for BGFX, it will compile a bunch of variations of your shaders for all possible backends of BGFX, even if you're just targeting a single API. So I would say it's a fairly good option, probably for some people, but it feels a bit heavy for some other stuff. Another option is something called VEZ, made by AMD and the GPU Open project. That one targets Vulkan directly and is kind of focused on removing these pain points. Sadly, it's been for 3 years now, discontinued pretty much. AMD is not updating it. There is an open source fork of it, or there's a fork that has commits, but it's like 13 commits in the last 3 years also. it's not really going forward at much speed. So another option is to create something new that helps you out, and like what I'm thinking is like kind of glue for Vulkan. It would, I think, to be useful and practical, it would need to kind of almost become kind of official, like used in, like if you download a Vulkan example, you want it to use this by default. Otherwise it's just yet another support library that might be marginalized and stuff like that. Yeah, and we need stuff like being able to create, like programming Vulkan feels a bit Kafkaesque. You're like filling out all these forms and kind of being directed to different floors and like bend over backwards everywhere. So we need, I think, helpers for a lot of common stuff. Barriers is, yeah, painful. And helpers for this would be great. And yeah, memory allocations. For memory allocations, there's a fairly good solution actively maintained by AMD anyway, the VMA library. Yeah, and for barrier placement, we also have something in Mesa for D3D12, the D3D12 resource state helpers, which maybe could be ported into to help with Vulkan stuff. And yeah, fixed function shaders, because having to like fill out this huge pipeline stuff for just drawing a textured rectangle and stuff like that is a kind of little bit ridiculous. And I think if for something like fixed function stuff, it could also be an opportunity to modernize stuff a bit over what OpenGL does. So if there's lighting, we might be able to do physically based lighting instead. Like stuff like sRGB rendering should, I think, be the default. Things like that. Yeah, and we also probably need stuff like vertex streamers, so you can do similar stuff with GL begin, GL end to kind of quickly spit out some triangles. Yeah, and the last option is to leverage Zinc instead and kind of let that do a lot of these things for you. That has the benefit of OpenGL having a huge ecosystem that we can kind of reuse. But in order to like use this in an application, you would have to kind of link the whole GL driver into the application, because otherwise, you know, you wouldn't necessarily load the right driver. This is similar to what I believe Xplane is currently doing, and some other applications. I guess that's similar to what OS Mesa would do, but you need the ability for it to spit out the rendering at the end into your own Vulkan command stream. Yeah, and then the last point problem with that is, I think, creating stuff like extensions for ray tracing and mesh shaders in OpenGL just to be able to use it through one single GL implementation sounds like a lot of work, and probably not something that anyone else is going to be interested in. So it might be an uphill battle. Anyway, so I don't have a good solution. I think the right solution will probably be different for different applications and different people. But I would love for us in the community to think a bit more about how we do this, how we can do more Vulkan content without having to use a huge game engine or something like that. So that's pretty much it. Thank you. Collabra, always hiring. And yeah, if someone has any questions. We don't. Okay. If someone has questions or wants to discuss this further, please come to me. And yeah, if someone has great ideas, I'm all ears.